All right. So, welcome.
Hello.
So, can you please pronounce your name for me so I make sure I get it correct?
Yes, Mangano.
Mangano. Okay.
And then yours as well, please. So I can pronounce your first name correctly.
Fazia.
Asia. Beautiful.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So, I want to reiterate that I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's really nice when people are willing to come on the show and share their valuable knowledge and expertise with listeners. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So today what we're going to do is we're going to do a live show. It's going to be a full hour.
Okay.
So I want you to feel comfortable to talk as much as you want about whatever you want to talk about. Not only are we promoting you, but we're also sharing your valuable information with our listeners.
Okay.
So Matt is my producer. He's going to come on probably in a few minutes to do a sound check with you,
Okay.
as well as with me. So once he comes on and does the sound check, he will also do a check on the chat. In the chat, he will do a countdown, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 30 seconds.
Okay.
And that is just so that you know when it's time to go to break. When we get to about the 2-minute mark, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to thank you for being on the show and ask you to give your contact information. So if there's a website, if there's a email or phone number you want to share, feel free to do that. Okay. Some people have special offers they would like to offer. If you have something like that, like a free consultation or whatever it is, you can feel free to share that at that time as well.
Great. Should I have the chat open on my end as well?
You should. Yes.
Okay, let me grab that open then here.
Okay.
Yep, I'm glad I asked. Good. Okay, so I can see that on there now. Perfect.
Yes. So once he takes care of that, then at 2 minutes after the hour is when we'll go live. The music will play. It'll come back on. I'll say a quick introduction, and then I'm going to introduce you. I'm going to read the bio that you gave me, and then we're going to go through the questions. I like to start off with, tell us a little bit about who you are. How did you get started? Some people go just the route of their professional career, and other people talk a little bit more about their personal life. Whatever you want to share is up to you.
Okay.
I'm not one that's going to pressure you in any one direction. So whatever you want to do is up to you. I love what you do. Acupuncture, yoga, all of that stuff is wonderful. I think it's amazing, and people really don't understand fully how they impact your body and mind and how they can make your life better. So I love that you're going to talk about this.
I was going to say, yeah, hopefully we can get into some of that today.
Oh, I think we should be able to. So let me pull up your questions real quick.
Sure. And you can hear me okay so far?
Oh, yes. I'm just writing something down. Okay. So when we start talking, what I'll do is I'll ask you, just tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll go into talking about self-help books. We'll talk a little bit about your book, A Guide to Self-Healing, what inspired you to write it, and we'll go through some of your questions. And then I think if we have time, we'll talk about acupuncture and yoga.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely chiropractic first and foremost, but those are my, my supplement, my auxiliary offerings.
Sure. And sometimes those are the things that people love,
That's probably what I answer the questions the most about throughout the day. I mean, if they're in here as a chiropractic patient, like, they know what chiropractic is about ish. It's the different stuff that they want a little bit more of an explanation on. Oh, you know what? Let me plug my computer in real fast. So okay, she's there. And we're back. Okay. All the chords of our life.
Yes. Yeah, we're always recording something, aren't we? So one of the last questions that I like to ask is, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Okay.
So I would like you to think about that. I personally do not like surprises, so I won't surprise you with anything. At least I try not to surprise you. So that's a question I like to ask. So if you want to think about that, and then towards the end of the show, that might be the very last question.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be a good one. And I'm curious to see like how I would just like answer that right now after the trajectory of our conversation, what that will turn into, and actually probably be a completely different answer.
Yeah, it might be. It very well might change. Yeah. It's fascinating because when I ask people, and sometimes they'll answer like right at the beginning, and then when they've had time to think about it, it usually simplifies.
Okay.
It really simplifies down to, I would tell my 20-year-old self, everything's going to be okay, or don't worry so much, or take more risks. It's usually quite simple.
Yeah.
But yet very personal to that individual.
I'm sure. And just probably where we leave off in the conversation, the imprint of that will dictate the answer.
Exactly.
If you wouldn't mind, tell me a little bit about like your outlet. Who seems to be your population for your podcast and listeners?
So most of our listeners are adults, women, probably between 35 and 55-ish. I can't tell exactly because we have such a big range of listeners.
Yeah.
Most have interest in self-help.
Okay.
So that's usually the perspective that we go towards is, how can we help people create more success in their lives? As an executive function coach, I tackle a lot of different topics. So anytime I can tackle things that help people improve their lives, then those are the people that listen to us. So it's not the money people, it's not the car people, it's people who just want to improve their everyday life.
Absolutely. And the connection to their own body, probably, if we're going to talk a little bit more about health oriented passageways to get to that point today.
Exactly. Because as an executive function coach, I know that nutrition impacts your brain. Everything you do impacts your brain. So I'm all for bringing in a variety of different professionals, experts to help people identify what their needs are. I mean, I've had eye doctors come on to the show to talk about how sometimes executive function challenges can be mimicked by eye problems. So,
wow, fascinating. Yeah,
it is, isn't it? Yeah, I'm fascinated by it. So I'm like,
there's so much. I would say the more that we find out, the more we realize we don't know.
Right. And it's really nice for me to have this show because I learned from so many different experts. I'm sure I'll learn something from you today, and those things, they scaffold, they add up, and they really help me better help my clients too.
Oh, good. And yeah, please, as we're talking today, feel free to like pull me back into your outlet, like, hey, we've talked about this in the past. What would you recommend for this blank? So you your audience best.
Sure.
Would you say there's any access, level of spirituality within your content, or a little bit more applicable, like reality, day-to-day type stuff?
We've definitely talked about spirituality. Dr. Tracy Moreno and I have talked about that quite a bit because she has an organization called Free Spirit Coaching, and she talks about spirituality and that connection. And she also, you might really like her. I should connect you to.
Yeah, please do. I was going to say, I'll have to write that down.
Yeah, Tracy's awesome. I'm truly an awesome human being, but she just came onto my summit. We talked about anxiety, or no, we talked about trauma this time. She wrote an article for my magazine on anxiety, but she does a fantastic job helping people. She has yoga and sound baths and just a variety of different things that really touch on spirituality and what some people call woo-woo. but it's not woo-woo, it's science-based.
And
So it's
I hope
awesome.
we can get into that today, because that's really how my journey started. I needed the science before I could, sell that to people. But now my
Yeah.
practice is almost like more spiritual in essence. So
Well, we're
it's
spiritual beings.
right, right. So it's got to be part of the conversation. I'm happy to know that your viewers are
Absolutely.
thinking that way as well.
I am under the impression that everyone thinks that way,
Mhm.
but society makes us feel like we can't talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe we can start with that. What,
Okay,
like how that led into the book. I think that might actually be a better way of introducing your book.
okay. Yeah, no, I agree, and that's definitely it's an effortless conversation for me, because I really do speak to almost every patient about this at some point throughout the day. So yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, I love that. I touch on things like that with my clients all the time. Um, my clients ask me all the time, do you believe in this or that? I'm like,
Mhm.
I either do or I don't, but I definitely am not afraid to have that conversation.
Yeah, it really just matters if they believe it. If,
Yeah,
if they believe it, they'll give power to that, and it's their medicine. So we can all have different beliefs on that, but at least, yeah, they have that personal experience to even like set the page to open the conversation to others. So that's great.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Trying to figure out what happened to my producer.
Uh-oh.
There he is.
Hey, good morning, Fozzie. How you doing?
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Doing good.
I want to introduce you to Dr. Marina Mangano. And Marina, this is Matt, my producer.
Hi, Matt, how are you?
I'm good, Marina. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good, good. All right, we'll go ahead and do some sound checks. Fozzie, go ahead and count back from 5 for me.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, sounds good. And Marina, go ahead and do the same.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, and are you just using the internal mic on your computer or webcam?
No, I have a little bit of a external soft head that's kind of
Okay, could you bring it?
basic.
Yeah, bring it closer to you. It's a little roomy.
Sure.
All right, and then count back one more time.
I don't think we can hear her.
Marina, can you hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, go ahead and count back from 5 one more time. Okay, yeah, the sound is now cut out. So I don't know if you hit a mute button on there, maybe.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. Do me a favor and like kind of like tap on the microphone. Okay. I thought I heard it when you were moving it, and obviously it's working. You have because the mute button was working on there. It just
Put it
seems
right
to
in
be
front
a
of me.
little
First.
roomy.
It's gonna put it right in front of me. Let me know if this is any better. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. Yeah, that sounds all right there.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. Let me send a hello over in the chat. They come through, Fozzie.
Thank you. Yep, got it.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, if you are ready, I'll get you started.
I'm ready.
All right. Have a good show.
Thank you.
Welcome to Focus on Success with Fozzie Acosti. Our program is designed to help you with executive function challenges. Our guest experts offer perspective, experience, and ideas to improve different aspects of your life. Now, here is your host, Fozzie Acosti.
Hi, welcome to the show. Today we have Dr. Marina Mangano. She has just recently written a book called A Guide to Self-Healing. She is a chiropractor, a yoga practitioner, and she also loves to do acupuncture, which I think is fascinating. Dr. Mangano, I was going to read your bio and I just lost it on my screen. Do you mind telling
I
our
can just kind of spit
listeners?
it out. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't mind, thank you.
Absolutely. So yes, I wrote, it's a guide, but it's called The Gift of Healing Hands. And it is a practice of the stages in which I learned my main craft. I'm a chiropractor. And that chiropractic practice has led me down a road of combining yoga, acupuncture, a little bit of like mental processes. I call it a mental movement and things like that. So I'm in southern New Jersey, my hometown, almost Cape May, New Jersey, where I practice on a lovely little island. And so this kind of easy, kind of vacation-y vibe here really builds the option to talk about this type of stuff with patients throughout the day.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I love that you combine a traditional practice like chiropractor or chiropractic care with yoga and acupuncture.
Mhm.
I also love that you talk about the spiritual side of healing. And
Absolutely.
during right before we started the live show, you and I talked specifically about bringing up the topic of the spiritual side. Can we talk a little bit about what brought you to a place where you wanted to write this book? What was the spiritual background for this particular book?
Yeah, I think so. When I first graduated from school, I was practicing in Oklahoma. So I wrote this book mostly when I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which everybody knows is like one of the Bible Belt buckle. And I don't know if I even knew what the word spiritual meant at that time, but the more that you work with bodies throughout the day, you just start to see things that there's no research study to explain it. There's no why, there's no teacher who could teach it to you in school. And so this book was kind of me organizing my thoughts, organizing my questions. How could I explain what I'm seeing, the phenomenon that I'm seeing on the table to people in a way that's palatable, in a way that applies to their life? And you have to be careful when you talk about spirituality to respect all the different belief systems. And so now I'm comfortable using the word spiritual. At that time, I probably talked to more like your subconscious body, may be believing this, or your mind may have trouble with this. So this book really helped me fine tune my message, and it's a guide because it allows people to work through that process themselves at home, starting with what you know about your body in a physical sense. Maybe some medical practitioners have developed that. Where have you started to have your own intuitive, medical thoughts? And then that leads and builds up to the spirituality of healing.
So can you define what does it mean to be spiritual for our listeners who really can't separate from maybe religion and spirituality? What is the difference?
I think that's a lifelong journey, is understanding those balances. I would say spirituality in the way I'm comfortable using it now is more of an essence that you understand that your body is in connection with so much more around you. That can be a higher power. That could be, I live near an ocean. So you can't stand next to an ocean and see a sunrise and not be moved, not have a physical response. So spirituality to me is this openness to understanding and wanting to learn more about where these systems apply to you. Those weird aha moments where you're like, I just met this stranger and I don't know, I feel like I've known them forever. So it's that openness, that consciousness to life around us is how I would call that.
Yeah. It's funny that you're talking about that connection. You feel like somebody, you've known somebody your whole life. People always say that about their spouses.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I first met this person, I wondered, where were they my entire life?
Right.
Why, that connection is instant.
How did it work out that they just landed when I needed them at that moment? Mm-hmm. All those
Yeah. And you hear a lot of people talk about how there are no mistakes in life, that everything happens for a reason. And I think there's some truth to that. Would you agree with that?
I would, specifically in healing. I think we are so hard on ourselves. I say the word should and should be removed from the dictionary in healing. But I as a yoga teacher, I teach regular weekly classes, and I have people who come in, I should have been doing this for years, or, I was so mean to my body growing up. And we have to start fresh. We have to say the exact day that you walked in this office for care was the right time. because you, whatever you've learned, all these experiences you've had, if I had met you 2 years ago, maybe you wouldn't have been receptive to these conversations, or, you would have had to experience something that allows you now to move on completely present and heal. So
Yeah.
timing is everything with healing.
I agree. I absolutely agree. You're not going to do anything unless you're ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have a certain number of other experiences under your belt before you're ready for the next level.
Yeah. And it's really up to the provider, in my mind, to recognize when someone's not ready, before you add stress to their nervous system, before you add anxiety to someone who's struggling with traumas, or physically does not feel safe to let me come in and give them like a big bear hug, So my work has really softened compared to like how we're taught in school, very like orthopedic, neurological, quick. And I think that the people who come in and benefit from that really need that slow integration into, I'm going to be vulnerable with you in my body. So I hope that everybody, part of the reason I wrote this book is that because I want people to understand this high standard that I think everybody has access to, if they just know the right questions to ask, to find providers in all different outlets of care, that this is the new normal for us. And this is what everybody should expect when they go to any kind of medical care.
I think it's interesting because not all providers are going to be ready to do that either.
No.
They too have to reach that level.
It may not be their focus. They're very successful business people in the medical field. Someone who's definitely more involved in an insurance-based program like emergency services and surgeons, they are so dictated by necessary scopes of practices, necessary insurance-based protocols, where autonomy in chiropractic, not everywhere, state by state, of course, but autonomy in massage therapy, autonomy in being a yoga therapist. The beauty of that gives us the space to like sit and actually speak to a person and not look at them like a 15-minute clock or how much I'm going to bill for this conversation.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about why is this book different from other self-help books?
That's tough. Self-help is just like this umbrella phrase, right?
But it's a huge umbrella.
It is. And I am first and foremost a reader. My whole life, I've had my face in a book, and I have read I'd like to hope I've read, all the major self-help books and healing, religion, spirituality, yoga, chiropractic, weird woo-woo stuff. And it's almost like if you were involved in a medical program, you would be exposed to something called a review of research. So someone maybe writes a paper that is a review of other people's research. I describe this book like that sometimes because it is a review of, the 15 years worth of self-study, personal journey of healing, my academic studies, and then my clinical studies. So it's like, I want to get people to this high level of standard of care as fast as possible, as safe as possible. So I pull my favorite things from all these other self-help books, all these other medical practices, and I think I package it in a way that I've just, over the years of watching people benefit from it, I know what's going to help people. I know the questions to like poke holes in those resistances, and to safely guide them to that next step. So I think that's the big difference. And because I am still a daily practitioner, I'm never done learning. I'm never done tweaking my message. So this book is not stagnant. It's not like, oh, I popped this message out and it doesn't apply anymore. I'm living and breathing this in practice every day.
Who should read your book? Who does this book apply to?
Interesting enough, when I was, when you write a book over years, you rewrite it, you fine tune it. And I realized that I wrote this book to a wide variety of audience, but the introduction describes two different people. One person is getting overwhelmed because they've just been introduced to this world of self-help, intuitive medicine, mind-body connection. There's all these words that are kind of just influx of information. So this book is for that audience who wants a nice, organized way to break into it. And I love telling you, if you like this topic, go read this book. If you like this topic, follow this woman. So I think it gives you outlets of like, I'm not going to be the master of all of these, but I can be a doorway to those things for your further study.
Exactly.
And then the second half is actually, I speak to medical practitioners. A lot of just my conversation is always going to be, hey, if you're, I've seen such great success with this. If you're a practitioner who knows there's more going on in this body besides muscles and bones, do not be afraid to start diving into this world with us. Like, we're out there, join this new wave of practitioners.
Nice.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. So, of the overwhelmed people who you deal with, are they receptive to your message, or does it take them time?
In the beginning, I did not know how to deliver this kind of message. And as a new young practitioner, you just like throw stuff at people and you hope something lands and you hope they like you and come back enough to like fix what you said. So yeah, over the years, I just feel like now I've I would consider a very empathetic person, sympathetic person. So I hope to match the person I'm in front of and become a chameleon to recognizing the neurologist in me as a chiropractor. I'm watching when I say something and their eye twitches, or they suspend their breath, or they haven't swallowed in a minute. So all of these little subtle body cues, because I'm a body worker, I'm enabling the conversation or understanding if they're ready to, understand this message. And that's all in one day. I get the honor of seeing people multiple times, and we shed off in layers. We get into deeper conversation in layers. So also in the beginning of this book, for those overwhelmed readers, those overwhelmed population, I can't stress enough the importance of pacing yourself. We have the rest of our lives to learn about this. And once you open this door, you will never go back. You can't unsee your ability to communicate with the inside of your body, to communicate with the spirituality around you. And so you don't have to buy all 30 books on self-help books on this kind of stuff in one day. You're not going to be able to process it and apply it. So it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And people can have a really harsh reaction when they try to do too much too soon. So, just trusting your instincts of, this may just ignite that journey for you. It's going to come at your pace. Life's going to happen. And it's going to lead you to the teachers who take you to the next step when it's ready.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely agree that things happen the way they're meant to happen. And when you're ready, you will find the people that are meant to be there to help you on your next journey. What was your biggest challenge writing this book?
I guess organizing the content. I have so many interests. I'm a dilettante. Like I have so many interests, and I really wanted to pull it into a couple different outlets that I think I am, warranted. I should be able to talk about these things. Probably the most effective topics. And so you could write millions of books on yoga, because your yoga practice is never going to stop and always evolves. But I had to really hone it in and like reel myself in, not put all my eggs in one basket, save some things for the future. So I think that was a challenge, to say, I think I'm done in my chiropractic chapter. I think I'm done with my emotional storage and traumas chapter. I think I've said what I need to say in the quantum healing chapter, which was like a whole bizarre thing that I did not go to school to be a quantum physicist. So that was probably the hardest chapter to write, because I didn't feel, that I was allowed to talk about that kind of stuff. But then when I gave myself permission to understand that I'm introducing this topic to people, they are going to go out and do their own research on it. Like if it's an interest to them, if it speaks to them, they will know to go find, better sources for this kind of stuff. And that just like grace, that, release gave me the freedom to write. And it's actually now my favorite chapter. And it's a lot of people have given me that feedback that it really speaks to them. So it was really cool, very rewarding.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about quantum healing. What is it?
Oh boy, I got myself into this. The word quantum, I joke in the beginning of that chapter, is popping up everywhere in movies, anything quantum this, quantum that. It just fills the gaps for any type of plot that we don't understand. Hey, we need aliens to get into this. All right, let's just use the word quantum physics on that. And that should just, satisfy people.
Covers everything.
Yeah, just quantum anything. In, physical land, in body land, something called quantum medicine, or like an intuitive medicine provider, is starting to pop up. And when I instinctively, as a clinician, when I hear those words, I'm like, I cringe. And like, what does that mean? And, it's like you can be very skeptical, until I started having personal experiences with physical elements. I mean, physics like electricity, physics like EMF, physics like how a decision in your mind can immediately change the presentation of your body. Then I was like, oh, something's up here. So I really did a lot of personal research until I felt comfortable enough to explain how the frequencies of your mind are influenced by everything around you. And so for a great example of what this means, if you hold your hand up, it looks like it's this solid mass, right?
Right.
To a quantum, description, a quantum view, there are tiny little cells and particles that are all in constant fluctuation. And they are fluid, they are moving, but all together in that perfect symmetry, that perfect orchestra, to us, it seems stagnant. It seems like it's just this solid thing. So when looking through the microscope of this science, it helps you, it shatters all of our illusions and it's Newtonian physics is what we're taught in school. It shatters all of those illusions and makes you look at this body as this ever-changing, ever-adapting, we can influence it, physique. So it's really cool. It is definitely one of those areas that people are going to be like, I can't swallow this right now. Like, this is a lot. Please go back to the beginning. So I hope that the prior chapters start to open the good questions, open the good doors. So then when you do get to this chapter, you're like, okay, I could see that.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in. And one of the joys of this book too is it's not always meant to be read cover to cover. Some people have no interest in this, what we just talked about, and they can skip that chapter and come back to it. There's there's a sequence in which I learned it and which I see people benefit from learning it. But if your interest is in yoga and not really like sound healing, skip the physics chapter and go right to the yoga chapter, those kind of things. So make it your own journey.
Let's talk a little bit about acupuncture.
Mhm.
How does that yoga and chiropractic care go together?
So almost every, I don't call it a spiritual system, but almost all of these ancient systems have some kind of belief that we have this essence within us. So in yoga, they talk about this thing called prana. It's this vitality. We just have this, like, something is pushing us forward in life and something is trying to, improve our life. In acupuncture, they call that chi. And we may be a little bit more exposed to that word. It's like, oh, there's good chi in this room. There's just like a nice energy. And then in acupuncture, they believe that this chi is housed in these invisible lines, of course, but that are there, just like the subtle science of, again, we're not just this big mass of muscles and bones. In chiropractic and traditional schooling, we're taught very neurological, very orthopedic, muscles, bones, nerve pathways, movements. Some schools are a little bit more philosophical. Some schools are going to talk to you about, hey, when you're adjusting people, you are opening these channels and memories. You are opening someone's life experiences. They can get a little bit more spiritual with that. So you got to watch your footing depending on what school I'm talking to, because a lot of the schools have different philosophies. But for someone who works with bodies all day, has the mentality, has the space to look deeper than I'm just crunching somebody in 5 minutes and kicking them out, starts to notice temperaments and that the body is talking back. So that talking back, when I first witnessed that and I, couldn't unsee it in care, that led me to learning more of how does yoga describe what's talking back? How does acupuncture describe what's talking back? Even things like, therapy and the kind of traumas and different styles of talk therapy that, pull out like a child in you, pull out like a triggered version of you. What are we all talking to? And I think that is always my mindset when I'm looking at these different techniques and pulling it all into in 30 minutes. What is the most prominent thing to work on today? How can we align all of these energies? And as we're working on the physicality of the body. it's a lot to digest.
It really is. It really is. So, I have, I've gone to see a chiropractor. I know I have friends that see chiropractors regularly. They never talk about the spiritual side of it. They never talk about anything other than I went in, I saw my chiropractor, and now I feel better. So do your clients feel different other than like traditionally most people go see a chiropractor, they come home, they feel better, but they don't talk about the spiritual side. They don't talk about, what channels have been opened.
Right.
How do you address that with your clients?
When they come in, first of all, now I have the benefit of when people refer people in, they kind of have a little bit of an idea. Someone has given them a heads up that I'm a different type of practitioner. But when I am surprised by seeing a new person who has no idea what they're getting into, I start with my foundation in chiropractic. So we are looking at body stuff. But in conversation, whenever I meet a new patient, I always ask about anxiety, depression, sleep, health. Those subtle signs from more my acupuncture training will tell me in the back of my mind, oh, okay, you know what, if they have really bad jaw pain every night at 3 a.m., I'm going to look at this area of their body while we're working today. So I may not always present the kind of weirder, deeper spiritual stuff in the beginning until I maybe find like an avenue as we're talking, or I just hear maybe a little subtle comment of like, you know what, my tension always is in my shoulders. That's a pretty normal thing to hear from people. I think we're butting into like a new normal for people to understand that stress and our emotions can resonate in physicality. So at least I don't have to fight that battle anymore. Now it's more like, I don't think people realize that they can do something about it. And so that is my message. That is, I love that you witness those signs in you. When your boss walks in and your headaches start, that's great. Now you have to trust that you have the skill set. We're going to work on it in here, but that you have the skill set to, set up a barrier to that, find an outlet after work to release that so it doesn't affect you so physically. So I try to always have to answer your question, I feel like it has become it's a long journey to find the timing to introduce this type of spiritual, type of deeper stuff. But, we attract people like us, I think is what it comes down to. Like attracts like.
I agree.
So I tend to now in my practice, I'm so firm and authentic in what I want to do for people. I believe that I really only attract people who that message is going to be easy for. I don't work with a lot of people who are, refuse to pay attention to their body or don't know anything about how stress affects their physicality. So in the process of learning how to get to that point in your practice, there's going to be some bumpy, stages, and I'm not going to be for everybody, but I know who I am for. And that's, how I was able to actually sit down and say, I finished this book, because otherwise you would question everything,
Yeah, absolutely. Has your message changed at all since you started writing this book? You said it's taken a considerable amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Has your message, has your outlook on this message changed since you started?
I started writing, yes, is the answer to that. I started writing this book in 2018, which is what I call in this book, in a woo-woo term, will be like, this was my awakening year. This was my cracked open kind of year. Very, every outlet in my life was under a big transition. And this book anchored me. This writing practice brought me back to earth. And so since that time, my life has changed so much. I just got married this year.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. I moved back home during the pandemic. And so my message now is just I'm not afraid to say my message now. Whereas when I was writing this, I was like, okay, I was in an outlet that I'm not from Oklahoma. I loved the people that I met there, but there was always this reminder of I'm not from here, so
you didn't fit.
Exactly. And so I'm really in my element where I am. And so there's nothing hindering or skewing my message because I'm not so afraid of how it's going to land. In the future, things that I write will probably be much less medical. I feel like I had to write this book for my colleagues who are trying to blend into this. And now that I feel like I wrote the book that I had to write, now I get to write what I want to write. So I'm looking forward to continuing my message and my practice in the future.
Yeah, no, I find it fascinating how we feel this need to do things.
Mhm.
I truly believe we all have a destiny. We all come here to do something. And, just like you didn't feel right in Oklahoma, you were still there to learn something.
I would not have learned much of this if I did not work there
Right.
and not live there. Yeah.
And you needed that experience to build on what you're doing now. So I think it was much needed, but you knew it wasn't for you. And I
Absolutely.
think that's what's fascinating. It's like we know what's right and we know what's not right for us. And what's right for you may not be what's right for me. It's just a fascinating thing. I think people need to listen more to their intuition, to that gut.
Yeah, and absolutely. And just looking back, I always ask people about calendar pain, and I won't take too long with this, but when someone says, oh, every year, my back goes out every year, I'm always like, what month? Let me know when. What is this type of year for you? We are so responsive to the seasons around us that you just start to affiliate that you will act this way in this season. And some people have, really harsh anniversaries of losing somebody. And so every time that comes up throughout the year, they're like, oh boy, we're going to have to deal with this again.
Yeah.
And so I really try to pull that to the surface for people and help them know, you're not crazy. This is within you. Your body is reacting to what it's learned from the past in this time, or what it projects in, the future this time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
really cool.
How can somebody get in touch with you? How can they get a copy of your book?
Absolutely. So my book is published through Balboa Press. So at all online major book sales, Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, or Balboa Press, the producer itself, and is The Gift of Healing Hands. And all of my social media outlets are under my platform, Cairo Yoga Flow. So all of those link trees and things like that will bring you to the book, as well as please always feel free and feel comfortable to reach out and ask any questions that you think are pertinent to starting this book or starting your own journey with practitioners near you.
So how can somebody get a hold of you if they wanted to work with you?
So working with me, most often, I think, if you're in the area, you're going to have the best benefit because, hands-on is my key. But I do actually do a lot of virtual sessions as well. So maybe like movement-led sessions, maybe some mentality type of perception of your body sessions. So all of that will be information and links on my website, www.cairoyogaflow.com.
Thank you so much. So Dr. Marina Mangano is our guest today. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can go to executivefunctioncoachaz.com. Make sure you are subscribing to our magazine, Executive Function Magazine. And this week we actually launched our summit, Executive Function Summit, and it's our second annual summit. If you can go to our website, you can actually access it on our YouTube channel, which is connected to the website. Once again, that's executivefunctioncoachaz.com. And we have a $1,000 scholarship that is going to be launching in our magazine. So make sure you subscribe to the magazine so you can access that scholarship information. We'll be back after these messages. Thank you for listening.
All right, good job. We're all clear.
Thank you.
Great.
All right. How did you feel about that?
Good. I hope I'm not overwhelming.
Not at all. You were absolutely fabulous.
Good.
So we did go through most of the questions. What I was hoping to do is come back and talk about what you're working on now and maybe some success stories. Can we talk about that for 25, 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if I off the top of my head, I do incorporate that in every chapter. I always want people to have a, relatable story of what I mean when we're working on this chapter, blah, blah, blah. But I can always pull stuff up. So yes, no,
Okay.
we can talk about that for sure.
All right. So stories and next, what's next? Okay.
Yeah, stories, and then maybe asking if you want to say can you let's go through a couple highlights of per chapter. just to give people a little bit more of that content information.
That would be lovely. I just wasn't sure how much you wanted to talk about the content of the book, but we can do that.
Yeah. That's not a secret. Let's do
Perfect. Let's do it.
it.
You know, I'm a big believer of the more you give, the more people are interested.
Mhm.
And the more you share, the more you find you have to share.
Yeah,
You know?
getting this out of me was a healing process. It was very
Yeah.
cathartic. Like if I kept all this inside, I was like building up. So it was very helpful to get it out, because I answer almost the same questions. And I could mention this too while we're filming, is people would just ask me things so repetitively in an office that I'm like, oh, this isn't common knowledge. Like,
Let's talk a little bit about that.
okay, yeah.
I think that would be a really good thing. Talk about what are some of those questions?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think we have enough. I think we can cover the next section with that.
Great.
Yeah.
Obviously, I love this stuff, so I could talk all day. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think you're fabulous. I love what you talk about. I love what you do. I think it's and I love how you present it in a way that is not just about putting the bones back in place. It's more. It's much more than that.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of forgot to mention when I was getting married and meeting my family, now in-laws, that was probably the last edit I did through the book. And almost in my mind, I was editing it as if I was writing to my father-in-law, because someone who is not exposed to this world of, self-help, not exposed to this generation of, you don't have to be in pain, those kind of things. So having that, little glass on how I was writing has sharpened the message a little bit, to not just be so assuming that everybody's on the wagon with me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we are coming back.
Thank you, Matt.
You are listening to Focus on Success. To reach Fawzia Costi or her guest on the live show, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. You may also send an email to Fawzia at executivefunctioncoachaz.com. Now, back to Focus on Success.
I welcome back, and I just want to give a quick shout out to our listeners around the world. I really appreciate everybody joining us today. Today we're talking to Dr. Marina Mangano. She is the author of The Gift of Healing Hands. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about during the break was you said you get a lot of repetitive questions, and that you assumed people just should know this information. What are some of the questions that you heard over and over again, and how did you address that?
Yeah, my first patient visit is always an hour long. That's a lot of time to be talking to people. And of course, I have highlights that I always want to come up, that come up in the visit. And maybe the second year in practice, I just assumed it was on me to not educate people correctly. And then now, as I see again these things, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I really thought that there was a little bit more common knowledge. I'm so integrated, and we'll specifically start with chiropractic. Chiropractic is my life. It's my bubble. All my friends are, I have a lot of chiropractic friends, family members, and some people have never been to a chiropractor. Their parents have never been to a chiropractor. Now that I'm back on the East Coast, there's no schools really locally. There's about 18 chiropractic programs in the country. That even right there, people don't realize that we have to travel to go to school for, an extra 4 years after undergrad. And just why we look at the body a certain way. People have no idea that there are different varieties within our field, that we're not all taught the same. And I think one of them I always talk about the most after 3 years of people asking me this question is a limitation in my field, actually, that people are not that aware of, that we all have one baseline curriculum. Then outside of that curriculum, you can go chase your certifications in your interests. But in like a medical program, for example, you go through, you pick a specialty and you finish your classes to help certify and specialize you in that field. We don't have that as chiropractors. So then for our, let's say our state credentialing and hours of continuing education, I joke in the book that imagine the podiatrist and the oncologist have to sit through the same classes, or, imagine that the pediatrician has to sit with the same, interests of a podiatrist. Like we just are all pushed into this one bubble. And it creates a lot of conflict where I can't just say, please go see a chiropractor. Not every chiropractor is gonna, in every field there's variety, but one of the best things I have in this first chapter is kind of my go-to questions to help people call and almost interview this new office a little bit before they just assume that all chiropractors are going to be like me. So I guess those common knowledge things that I'm always surprised about are, one, that people don't understand that they even are allowed to pick us. Not that like they have so much that they do have option to providers beyond what they've experienced in the past. And then I think we were joking over break that generationally, people are becoming so much more aware of resources and options that being in pain is not normal. It's common, but it's not normal. Women with incontinence, just because you've had kids, it doesn't mean you have to have incontinence. It is very common, but it is not normal. And in a lot of, most often it's quite fixable. So there's so many things, but ultimately it was those type of repetitive answers that, oh my gosh, I could talk, I lose my air throughout the day. And I'm like, I better start writing this stuff down, because clearly there are a lot of unknowns in the field of manual therapy.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little bit about what are some of those questions that you thought should be common knowledge. What are some of the questions that they would ask you that maybe you thought should be common knowledge, but you were getting it repeatedly?
Okay. Let's say someone comes in with jaw pain, and I will be working on their hips to fix it. And they're like, what are you doing? I came in here for jaw pain. People do not realize how interconnected your body is, how the tension and forces of your ankles, for instance, suspend your neck. Just things that I look at a body and I just get lost. And coming in, people don't realize that there are so many other things contributing to their pain. So mostly the question would be like, how is my ankle helping my core strength? Or how is my shoulder pain related to my headaches? And then another big one is like surgeries. I have so much post-op work that I do with people. Of course, they're way post-op. They're already gone through their PT. But I hear questions of, am I allowed to ask questions when I talk to my surgeon? Like, oh, won't they get mad at me if I say I don't want blank? Or won't they get mad at me if I ask them, like saying like they don't know what they're doing? And just the communication style that I think people feel comfortable to have in here. They don't realize that they deserve to have that everywhere.
Well, I think we've been conditioned to think that we don't question authority.
Mm-hmm.
And what most people, from my perspective, what they don't understand is that if it's your body, you're in charge of it.
Right. Right. I mean, of course, we're going to take
You have-
recommendations from specialists.
Right. But you still have to ask questions. If you're not sure, what that surgery is going to look like,
Mhm.
you have to ask, what is the surgery going to look like? How will it impact my life afterwards?
Mhm.
Maybe the surgeon doesn't think about answering those questions because they just do the surgery all day long.
Right. It's, we're always taught like if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Exactly.
And that's getting a lot better. There are so much integrated practices now where just because you're a surgeon doesn't mean every consultation you have goes to surgery. Luckily, I can't say the same thing for 20 years ago, so we're getting into this environment of options. And a certain question too, when you're working with a surgeon is, what can we do before this is the option? What type of physical therapy can I go to? What kind of strength trainer can I go to before this is my final option? So to even know that you are allowed to ask those questions, to bring in your person, your support group, maybe that if you're not great at verbalizing those things, you know that this person will always stand up for you. That's a great thing to do
Yeah.
with new practitioners. Yeah.
Or even ask, do I have to have surgery?
Mhm.
You know, it might be the doctor's recommendation, but you still have the choice.
Right.
You
Yeah.
still have that choice.
And even in less extreme forms, when you go to a chiropractor and they say, hey, we're going to see you 3 times a week for 13 weeks. I'm like, what are we going to do for that? That's so many visits. Like,
Right.
I want to understand why I need to be coming that often, why my body that's way smarter than, a person outside of me isn't going to be able to pop back into its normal self, why I have to keep coming to see you. So I think when people hear that, they're like, oh, you're not very good at business. Like, you don't want me to be here all the time. It's almost just, it's called locus of control. So in any type of health behavior class, we're taught this phrase, locus of control. You can either have an internal, most often people have an external locus of control. They believe that they are not going to fix themselves, that someone externally has to help them, externally decides their fate. And in the honor of being in my field is usually we give people the heightened sensation of an internal locus of control.
Which is a much better feeling, I think.
Just gives you hope. You should leave feeling hopeful. And I'm so, my whole life, I played soccer. I grew up playing soccer and in college. And I've just had a lot of really bad medical experiences. I would say most people who find themselves as chiropractors probably had some pretty bad injuries growing up. We found chiropractic helped our bodies and we got inspired and wanted to share this with other people.
Yeah.
And there's therapists are very similar in that sense.
Yes.
Even doctors, people have just had these beautiful experiences and they want to share that medicine. But I work so hard to unwire and rewrite just these seeds of information that people have in their head. Some man 20 years ago told me my hips are out of alignment, or some guy told me I had to have hip surgery. It's like, you can't unhear those things. So
Right.
go through your day, you go through your movement, any little reinforcement you find, it like I said, it reinforces that stimulus and you start to believe it. Or, your dad had bad back surgery, so you're probably predisposed to that in your future. I would say half of my practice is helping people dispel those false projections.
Words are so powerful, aren't they?
They are.
They're so powerful. They impact us in so many ways. And I don't think we realize how much they impact us because people continue to do and say things that maybe they should rethink.
Maybe they get desensitized. I just jump
Yeah.
into doctor's offices sometimes, and I know I'm sensitive to this because it's my platform. But they'll say certain things and I'm like, whew, you didn't even hold off for a second on saying that. Like I wonder if they realize how respected and how much weight we put behind practitioners' words. Diagnoses are the same. I'm very cautious with saying, if you don't, like I would never say the words, oh, if you don't fix this, you're probably headed towards a really bad injury. That doesn't inspire any type of motivation, like a positive motivator. That's just a fear-based motivation. It's a fear-based practice. And so I always have an ear for that. If I'm in the emergency room for some reason, I work with a physical therapist in my office too. So I try to listen to the different dialogues that overall you should leave a visit with a sense of hope. If unfortunately you got a diagnosis that is not positive, at least given the sense of, hey, I do know my next action step. And that at least is hopeful.
Exactly. Having a plan is it's huge. Yeah, huge. Would you mind sharing some of your success stories with us? Talking about maybe, an experience that you had with somebody that came in, maybe a difficult situation that came out with a positive outcome.
Yes. There's so many. And I'm not saying that like to toot my own horn, but I'm saying like, even within this book, I always try to introduce a new topic, and then I tell some type of treatment story along with it, because I think it helps to see like what, that someone else could benefit from something like that.
I think you should toot your own horn. That's what we're
Give me
here
a horn.
for.
Okay,
Go
I'll
for
do
it.
it. Thank you. The one that just came to mind. So actually in New Jersey, it is not in my scope of practice to be an acupuncturist anymore. So I
Okay.
really, but that was such an active part of my practice when I was in Oklahoma. So I'll tell that a story in acupuncture. I had a young patient who came in, probably like a 25-year-old male, really active, came in with like debilitating neck pain. No traumas, no accidents, nothing that it would warrant like x-rays or anything. And so I started to run my normal, soft tissue work. We're scraping, we're cupping, we're massaging. And then maybe if he was okay enough, not having any nerve pain, maybe I could adjust. And while we could improve his pain a little bit, it just was not going anywhere. And so, I see new people about like 4 to 6 times, I usually say, to really get things cleared up. Maybe after like the 3rd visit, I'm like, wait, why is this not budging at all? Like, instead of getting flustered and, worrying that I wasn't good enough to help this person, I just kind of took a moment, sat down and was like, let's go back to the beginning. When did this start? And he said, 2 weeks ago. I was like, okay, and still you didn't lift weird, you didn't, whatever, didn't sleep weird. And he said, no. I was like, okay, well then let's go to acupuncture today. Let's do a little bit more subtle science. Maybe we can calm your nervous system. Maybe we can bring out some nonsense that just does not belong to you anymore. Let's get the tension out of you.
Right.
So he was face down and I was using an acupuncture needle in these upper traps, these really tight muscles here. And I just got this sense, quick sense that I was falling. I'm sitting on a stool next to this man. There's no reason for me to be falling. And it was gone as soon as it came. And earlier in practice, I would not have paid attention to that. I would have been like, Marina, pay attention. What are you doing? Now that I've worked in this field so long and I understand that their body is always trying to talk to me in the presence of a provider, it's like the stuff comes to the surface. It's like, please help me. And so I had to be weird. And I was like, hey, 2 weeks ago, was there any reason that you fell by chance? And he started to say no. And then he goes, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to tell you, I went skydiving.
I'm sorry, that's kind of big.
I'm like, do you go skydiving a lot that you would have forgot that was, and he felt great doing it. There was no reason that he would have correlated like this could hurt me. He didn't land weird, parachute didn't hurt anything. And so, one, even just that awareness that that's what caused it probably helps a lot. But then 2, and I'll say, because when we get hurt, the snowball effect is lightning fast. It's like, oh God, where is this going? Am I going to need surgery? Oh no, see, I'm going to turn into my, my mom who can't move. It's
Right.
like we just run away so fast with pain. So I try to like pull people back. Let's stay here for a moment. But then ultimately had to have the conversation, which is part of acupuncture's just gift, is that the metal of the needle, I believe it's like a portal. So It opens up these conversations. It opens up access to different views on your pain. And we had to talk about, why this man went skydiving. And he just said he felt like he was losing control of his life, like he was really stagnant. He wanted to do something fun to kind of spice up his life a little bit. He wasn't really happy with his career at the time. And so symbolically, he may have actually made it worse by jumping out of an airplane and not being in control. So we kind of just mentally, I guided him through like a guided visual. You may take in a meditation class, a yoga class, while he had the needles in him, of, okay, let's focus on things that are really just so effortless in your life that you don't even realize that you are in control of or that you're succeeding in. And it was like 80% difference when he sat up and moved his neck around. It was just absolutely wild. And it was those kind of stories. Like there's always like inflammation and fine tuning stuff, but I don't think we would have ever made that quick jump with any manual therapy. Like that was the power of his brain, the power of what he felt his body, was incapable of. And it locked him down until he could come to peace with like, no, I'm okay. Let's move forward. Let's take the step on the safe ground, not skydiving. But that's always a favorite of mine. And then I wound up working with that man, just random injuries throughout the year. And we always joke about that first day, really both of us learned that day to not neglect the power of our mind, in our pain. So that was really
Absolutely. The mind is so powerful.
cool. Mhm.
Absolutely wonderful story. Do you have any other wonderful stories to share with us?
Let's see. Something it'll come to me in a moment, but something in my emotional pain chapter.
Okay.
So I have a chapter in here about emotional pain, like what does that even mean? And there's different levels to it and how I describe it to people. But the weirdest level, the level that I introduce at the end of that chapter, is something called symbolic pain. And it just describes how, that's just my term for it. You know, I've seen it done so often, and I've seen people benefit from recognizing the symbolism and then fixing the symbolism. That I started to see patterns, and I'm like, okay, we're going to make this a thing. And here's an example. You know, someone coming in with a really sharp pain in the back of their rib cage. They didn't fall, they didn't have any weird things. They weren't sick. There was no internal issues. They eventually, through conversation, I just know enough to ask now when I see this pain area that maybe isn't responding to an adjustment. It doesn't respond to soft tissue. Of course, I'm doing my normal stuff, but I always ask about betrayal now. It's weird.
Interesting.
And I gotta, you know, word it well that people like believe it's a necessary conversation. But we are such symbolic beings, visual beings, that when we feel stabbed in the back, at a certain point, if we're not, you know, sealing it, if we don't have closure, if we don't have peace with it, our body will start to resonate these symbolisms. So I see that there's a whole kind of list of the really most common ones I see, like stabbed in the back, someone's weak need, someone who like is too afraid to pull the trigger. I have people with like a trigger finger that come in and we fix it through these conversations.
Interesting.
So it's just such an interesting world, and it's endless. Everybody has different languages in their mind, different symbolism in their mind. So it's really up to like the provider and how easy we can converse to get these things to the surface. Of course, all within like my scope of practice. If I ever have, you know, some of the harsher ones I've seen where people were really weak in their core, like they weren't able to resist keeping their legs closed. If I was trying to like, hey, don't let me pull your legs apart, I'm going to see if your inner thigh works well. And there's just effortless, like weak, they could not control it all. And I have to have conversations with some of them in a really safe environment of, you know, maybe I need you to go see a therapist outside of here. You know, there's obviously maybe been some like sexual trauma or some type of postpartum issues that mentally your body is just does not want to connect with, and your brain cannot even fire those muscles because it's afraid of that region. So
Wow.
they're not all fun, kind of cutesy ones. Sometimes they're really heavy and they're a little harsh symbolisms. But I really appreciate people who are trusting enough to open up to me about that, and then we try to get them to, you know, the most appropriate, safe place for them to be.
Well, I really want to thank you for being on the show today. I think you've been an absolutely wonderful guest and a joy to talk to. So once again, if you don't mind sharing your information, if anyone wants to get a copy of your book, The Gift of
Yeah.
Healing Hands.
Let me pull it up here. This is our The Gift of Healing Hands. And then this is on Amazon, balboapress.com, Barnes and Noble, and all of my platforms. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and my website, www.cairoyogaflow.com.
Thank you so much. And yeah, so last question for you. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
She was a beast. She was working hard. I just want to like congratulate her. Like, just want to tell her that I know you're stressed and school's killing you right now, but everything that you're doing, 20 years, probably when I was having a lot of my really bad surgeries. I was graduating from undergrad. So all of this has a reason. There's a reason you're going to go through all this pain. There's a reason why the doctors are going to not take good care of you. And it's going to, you know, initiate a lifelong journey to help other people not have that experience and to improve all medical care. So,
thank you so much.
yeah.
And if you'd like to get in touch with me, please go to my website, executivefunctioncoachaz.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Executive Function magazine. There's a $1,000 scholarship that we are going to be giving out yearly. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go there as well. And make sure you take a look at our summit. Our Executive Function Summit is live this week, and you can access that on our YouTube channel. Once again, it's at executivefunctioncoachaz.com. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, good show. We're all clear.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That
And
was
you both have a
great.
great rest of your day.
You
Thanks
too.
too. I really appreciate you reaching out to me and making today work. That was wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.